Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Charles.
How you doing?
Good.
All right, so I hear John and Betty. Hi, Bernice. How are you doing? And is it Edie Clark? Okay.
They're muted.
Yeah, they are muted.
Yes, this is Edie Clark. Good morning.
Good.
That
Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday.
happy Monday.
We survived the weekend. How about that?
We survived another weekend.
That's right. Anybody have a wild and crazy weekend?
No, not really.
Nobody.
Yeah,
Nobody.
I got a plumbing leak.
A few years ago, maybe.
Yeah, nobody ran out to the tattoo parlors or gyms or anything like that. Okay. Okay. Ilana,
Did anyone see the blue angels?
I'm sorry, what, dear?
Did anyone see the blue angels?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I
heard
saw
about them and I've seen a lot of postings on Facebook, but no, I didn't actually see them.
Yeah, they flew right over our house.
Did they?
Oh,
We tried to get to the hospitals area to see it and got stuck on 400. It was clogged like Monday morning traffic.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so we went out of the car at the end because we couldn't get on time.
Uh-huh.
And we saw it, and everybody was parked along 400.
Oh, I
to
see.
see it. So this was funny.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I see
I
you
saw
have
it from
your,
my parking lot.
yeah. Well, I see you have your new painting back there behind you, Ilan.
Yeah, I just trying my best with acrylic pouring, and that's the first try.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit here in just a little while. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So basically, and I'll go back over, this, and most of you have heard this before. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody. Okay. And I'm going to do a short presentation. I'm going to show you a couple of artists that I wanted to bring to your attention. And maybe, you could spend some time looking at their work or whatever on your own after this. And then we'll meet back here again at 1 o'clock for the painting share. And I'll talk more about some of the paintings that you've submitted. And if you will, send me anything to that Fulton County email address that I've posted before.
Monday, it's 2 o'clock, not?
2 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Today it's at 2. Okay. All right. But yeah, go ahead and send me some things and I'll download them and it's okay. All right. So I'm going to mute everybody and we're going to get started. Okay. Okay. And this gentleman's name is Timothy Barr. Okay. And I just recently ran across his work and was really impressed by it. Excellent painter, but more, for me, it's sort of the mood that he sets with his paintings. And he feels very much similar to like Andrew Wyeth in a sense, similar subject matter and that same sort of feel to his work. But in many ways, I find his work probably more powerful even than Wyeth's. And I really don't know a lot about him, but in just seeing the 5 or 6 paintings that I've seen, they're pretty amazing. And if you look at this painting in particular and look at the composition, okay, now clearly the focal point, he's taking you back to this house that's moonlit. and it's the front side of the house where the porch and the front door and things are. And, you know, he has these long cast shadows in the moonlight and this huge, powerful tree, you know, here to really the foreground. And he's got this thing, and it fills probably like 3/4 of the page. You know, and it's like a really, really strong, striking element, you know, in this composition. No, this is really beautifully kind of planned out and composed. You know, all the spaces are divided, you know, really nicely. And again, you know, his painting ability, you know, his technique and his ability to make something look and feel like the thing he's painting, you know, are very strong. Moving on to the next painting. Again, you know, very similar subject. You know, he seems to like trees. And, you know, these big, I'm guessing that this is some type of maybe elm or oak. And, you know, he does them, you know, really well. And, you know, you might think that there's really a lot of like detail in there. And, you know, he probably goes a little further than I would, you know, in getting all these little branches and things in here. But he seems to do it well and do it in a way that it feels natural and not kind of contrived. So here's another landscape. And again, you know, really nice composition. You know, he's got these buildings that are way forward in the foreground that really pull you into the painting back to really the focal point, which is this stone house back here in the background. And again, you know, it's the play of light and shadow, you know, light areas, dark areas, really good control of value, you know, in the painting. Now here's something a little different, little unusual from him, where he does like a broader landscape. And, you know, this works, you know, it's a nice painting. I think we were having a conversation maybe a week or two ago about somebody had painted, oh, it was John actually. Yeah, you had done a landscape, and we had talked about adding more texture and things to the foreground.
Right, correct.
Yeah, this is a good example of that, where, you know, he's got this really textural element right here in the foreground, and the size and, you know, the size relationships of the brush strokes and things work to pull that area forward, and then everything else recedes. You know, because he's been very, very conscientious about either softening or blending back a lot of these areas in here so that they'll remain backward, you know, in the composition, and then letting this area right in here in the foreground move way forward. And again, you know, that's just a technical approach or technique that works really well. The thing in this painting that works for me really well is looking at how he used, again, the light. You know, not everything is lit evenly. You know, it's like the sun is breaking through the clouds. It's highlighting some areas of these fields and hills, but not all of them. But then also his use and control of color. You know, if you look at these mountains in the background, how he's grayed those down and made them more neutral, and it really does push them far, far back into the background. And along with his use of, you know, scale, it's like the size of these clouds back here versus the clouds here. And again, it's that contrast that pulls this area of the sky forward and really pushes that horizon line, you know, way back to the back. So, you know, there's a lot of nice things, you know, working, you know, in this painting. Though, you know, for me, it's, you know, it's not as powerful as some of his other work. Like, for example, I'll show you this one. Now, this is a very similar painting to the very first one. And in fact, it's really at the same location. And this seems to be probably a late evening or, you know, early morning view of this tree. Again, you know, he's composed it a bit differently. The focal point really isn't the house, you know, at this point. Now it's really the tree moving forward. And again, you know, he's cropped way in on that image, but his use of the cast shadows and light, you know, pulling your eye into the composition, and then the use of light and shadow on the actual tree itself, which is really the focal point and subject matter here, is really well done. And he gives you this nice sense of form on the tree by his use of those shadows and how those shadows lay across, you know, these larger branches. And so it doesn't feel like that tree is flat. It actually makes it feel like it's got dimension and it's round. And a lot of times when I see painters who are just beginning sort of in landscape, that's one of those elements that they tend to forget, you know, about the effect of light. You know, they'll paint a tree, but they're really painting sort of this idealized version of a tree. And they're really forgetting about, you know, the form of the tree and how the light's hitting on it and the shadows and things that it's casting. So, you know, it's one of those things. It's a little thing, but it makes a big difference, you know, in just thinking through and really visually seeing what's going on. Okay. So that was Timothy Barr. And if you get a chance, you know, maybe look him up online and, you know, see what else he's offering. Okay. Okay. So maybe I need to. All right. So I'm gonna open up. I'm going to open up this. Now, this is kind of a collection of things that various people have sent me. John, did you send me this?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. I just downloaded it, so I didn't have your name on it yet. But okay. And so, tell me a little bit about this.
Okay, I still have not purchased any type of drawing pens or charcoal, but so I use my watercolor pencils to do this. And I actually traced the image because I'm not that great at drawing, but I wanted to practice the shadowing. So I traced the image and used the watercolor pencil to work with texture and shadows.
Okay. When you did the tracing, did you do the tracing with the black? Is it a pencil or is it a pen?
The tracing is actually, I used tracing paper, carbon paper, and then drew over the image over the carbon paper. So I transferred. I actually used
so the black outline is the carbon paper.
Correct, right. So it does not fade.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my recommendation here. If you're going to transfer things with carbon paper, and I know that this is probably not something that you're going to do anytime real soon, but if you're going to be transferring those drawings and you're going to be working in sort of a brownish tone, you can actually get carbon or transfer paper in various colors.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
like reds, yellows, blues, greens, you know,
Ah.
stuff like that, at your local art store. And, you know, the thing is, if you only have black carbon paper, then I would use a gray or a black pencil along with that
I got you, right.
so that it seems to work with the outline.
Yeah,
Because right now, the outline is really dominating.
really, yes, it does.
Okay. And, you know, and it is what it is. But, you know, and you might take it from here and maybe take a gray or a black watercolor pencil, right?
Right,
And
correct.
begin to build in some of your tones from your, you know.
That's what I didn't know if I should make it monochromatic and just use the one, or if I could bring in other colors or tones.
Yeah, you could, you know, and I mean, maybe you don't keep it just monochromatic. Maybe you use two, and you have in fact already started that by using the gray and the
Right, okay,
sienna color.
right.
So if you pick up a black or a gray and say along here on the edge, you use
Right.
that black or gray to darken some of, you know, the tone
So
and
it's,
bring it to the edge so that
softens the edge.
yeah, right. So yeah, that outline begins to sort of, you know, disappear a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got very good, thank you.
All right. And then Betty sent me two drawings at the end of the week last week that I wanted to share with you guys. And these are really, you know, they're nice drawings of animals. And animals, they always say, you know, you never want to work with animals and kids. And the reason being that you can't get them to hold still. You know, they're going to move. So you just, it's almost like you have to work with kind of a combination of live observation with animals and photography. You can't really do without it. And she did this piece, and she did this piece as well. And the thing I wanted to comment with these is that in both cases, the thing that makes them, I think, interesting and strong is the fact that they both kind of convey an emotion, you know, an emotional reaction. You know, both of these dogs, you know, seem to have kind of a feeling that you get from looking at them. And you kind of relate to, you know, the personality of the dog. So I thought both of those were really, really good, strong drawings. And then June, or no, I'm sorry, Carrie Martin sent in two paintings. And these were both done at Benson. And, oh God, I'm trying to remember this model's name. Anyway, she sat for us not really all that long ago, maybe the last couple of months. And, you know, I thought the interesting thing about Carrie's painting, it's representational, but it's not like tight realism. And again, you know, because of the color and the composition and sort of the mood of the painting, again, you know, it has a kind of a very powerful feel to it. It leaves you, you know, with kind of an emotional reaction. And the same would be true with this. She has a little problem with the light, you know, that she was shooting the painting under. She's got a little glare right there on the paint, but you can still tell, you know, sort of the composition of it. Yeah, I thought both of those were really pretty well done. Let's see. And then Ilan sent in, and we'll talk about some of these further. This is Ilan's poured acrylic painting, which is...
It's my first try.
Yeah, well, but that was your background. Now you've gotten rid of it. That's too bad. It made a nice graphic background for you. But again, kind of a fun thing to do. And it may not end up being that this is the final piece. Maybe you take this, and since you tend to do collage, things like that, maybe you'll take bits and pieces of this and incorporate it into other pieces of work. Have you considered that?
I can put on it because it's made from like a thick
Like a
cardboard.
panel? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you could collage directly on it. Is it too thick to cut through?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I can try to pour on paper later, but I bought some cheap cardboards from the dollar store, which are $1 each.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I can practice with the pouring, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to understand the chemistry and the liquidity of it and so on.
Mm-hmm.
This was a little bit too liquid.
Yeah. Really? Huh. I didn't think so. I mean, I think.
No, when I poured it, it was it worked, but it wasn't perfect, And I don't know, I put some glue in it and it messed it up. And I put some silicone, but I don't see too many of those silicone bubbles that go up.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of them, but not a lot.
Okay. Now, how large was this?
It's 8 by 10.
Okay, so it's 8 by 10 inches.
Yeah, and I pulled it so it doesn't mess up my whole working area.
Uh-huh.
It's very messy work.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, if I were going to do something like this and play with it as an experiment, I would probably do it on a piece of like heavy watercolor paper and or like a mixed media paper. Again, so that I could then take it, use it as the painting itself, and or I could take it and cut sections or pieces out of it and then incorporate it into other projects that I'm working on.
Thank you. That's a very good idea.
Yeah, because I mean it's an interesting effect, and it's a good way of getting color and texture and things into a piece. And you've done some pieces in the past that could have benefited from working with some kind of more abstract background.
Absolutely.
Yeah, where you're collaging elements on top of it.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I just want to practice the technique so I can master it and I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a fun thing to do. So.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay. Is Rebecca Pickney here? Maybe not. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I wanted to show a couple of things that I've done really this last year. Okay. So we're talking, 2020, and the end of 2019. And this is a painting that I did. And I did this for Claudia and Ren's Pits, who some of you know. And this is a fairly large painting. It's about, it's 48 tall. I want to say it's 24-48, or maybe it's like 30-48, probably about 30-48. And this was a commission that I did for them. And it was of their reception, their wedding reception. So I call this the first dance, and or the dance of life. I haven't really decided on the title yet, but anyway, fairly large painting, but I was really happy with that. And again, I wanted to kind of talk about, you know, this thing of composition and how to use different elements and, you know, push things forward and backward. And, you know, this was one of these paintings for me where using the elements that were in the reference that I was painting from, and I had to paint this from photos. They didn't take that pose. And this was done some years ago. It's using the scale of the two figures here in the foreground to push them forward, but also, you know, contrasting them with the scale of the figures in the background. You know, it begins to, just like Mr. Bard did with his clouds and with creating more texture in the foreground with the grass. Again, you know, it's that use of scale, you know, similar objects, but treated differently in the background than it is in the foreground, that begins to give you this illusion, you know, of actual depth in the painting. You know, we all know this is a painting and it's really flat, but, you know, the fact is, you know, these figures, because of the scale, they do sit back. And also because of the contrast and also the use of color. You know, they're not quite as intense or high in contrast as the figures, you know, up here. You've also got the element of perspective and the floor and how it moves backward to, again, create that illusion of space. The same thing with the steps, you know, pulling forward. So there's a couple of different devices in there that I used to give the viewer this sense of depth and distance, you know, in the painting. And, you know, it, again, you know, it's something that I want you to become, you know, as you paint and create things. You know, that's one of the elements that you could play with, all right? Not that you have to, you know, like in Ilan's case, you know, because he's doing a lot of collage, things like that, you know, creating layers and depth may not be as important to him as it would, say, to maybe Betty or John, who, if you're doing a landscape, you know, and you're trying to create that illusion of distance, right? So keep that in mind. This is a painting, or well, it's actually a kind of a collage. I need to go back and see who sent this to me, but yeah, it was sent to me at the end of the week. And again, you know, it's an interesting piece. You know, it's sort of like very similar to what you do, Ilan, with the collage. You know, but with this, you know, she's using text, you know, she's using some sort of, it looks like cloth or paper, you know, with a pattern. She's got different elements, some of them treated kind of graphically, some of them treated, you know, kind of representationally. And, you know, it's a fun piece. And the thing about it for me is I would kind of encourage her to either go more graphic, you know, and more sort of design shapes and flat colors, and or, you know, to go in the other direction and try to make them, you know, more representational. You know, she's kind of in that kind of middle ground right now. And, you know, I'd kind of like to see her maybe push, you know, and simplify, you know, like some of the things like the peacock and the sun and the fish and all the birds into more simplified shapes and graphic elements, you know, than she's done right now. And also play with the composition, you know. Right now they all seem to be separate and kind of floating. And it would be nice if they sort of interacted some way, one thing overlapping another. Well, I just got the 10-minute warning. All right. So that's kind of all I've got right now. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? Anything they've seen? Anything that they've been doing recently? We're all quiet. How come? Here, I'm going to unmute everybody so everybody can talk. Hey, Veronica, how you doing?
Good morning.
Yeah. So have you been doing anything interesting?
Well, I'm sketching out the Fisher Building in Detroit
Okay.
because I want to take it to Canvas, but right now I'll share my sketches later. But yeah, I want to do that.
Okay. All right. How's the seascape going?
The seascape I left at for a minute to do my sketches.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So you're giving it a creative reprieve, huh?
Yes.
Okay. I understand how that works. You know, it's sometimes you work on these and you get to a certain point and you just got to set them aside until you kind of begin to resolve it more clearly in your head where you want to go with it.
Yes. The lecture today really helped with, putting things in the background and bringing things forward. So I'd like to implement that, or I'm able to kind of see it now a little bit better,
Okay.
for technique. So, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. One recommendation I might have for you is look at other painters who have painted seascapes.
Okay.
Okay. And see how they use color, composition, things like that.
Yes.
To create that illusion, because
Okay.
there's some really good seascape painters out there, and in
Okay.
fact, good figurative painter. I would kind of recommend looking at somebody like Bo Bartlett, for example,
Okay.
because he did a whole series that was up around Maine and that area, and the seascape is always an element, in those paintings, and so you might pick up some ideas there. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Along that line, I did the same thing Veronica was talking about, the suggestions you made, Charles, on bringing forth the front. And I did go back and rework some of my other paintings that I had done, and it really does make a difference by darkening or putting the detail in the front.
Okay. Could you possibly take some photos of those and send them to me so we can maybe look at how they were originally and then what you've done? To
okay.
Step.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's something that I'd like to share with everybody. As you kind of modify and change things.
Okay.
As these develop, I think it could be beneficial for other people to see how this sort of transition and move through the steps and process.
Go ahead and do that.
Because one of the things I find in working with students is that in a lot of cases, and particularly all right, I'm going to mute everybody. Some background noise. Okay. One of the things that I'm finding is that if people, if they don't get like instant gratification, if this doesn't begin to look exactly the way they want it to look early on, they get frustrated. And one of the things about having a class like this and being able to share the work process, how you develop and what this looked like in the early stages, the middle stages, and then toward the end, can really be beneficial to everyone, and let them see and visually understand that, oh, okay, this is going to develop slowly and I may not get there instantly, and it's just a matter of I just need to take the time to keep working at it, keep thinking about it, keep trying to resolve some of the problems and things that I'm encountering. Okay. Let's see, we have a chat here. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Edie Clark. So with that being said, again, we have the art share this afternoon, and it doesn't have to be paintings. It could be drawing. It could be, pottery. It could be collage work. It could be, what you're doing in your garden. A great meal that you fixed. Things like that. Again, this is about creativity and about, how you're spending your time, how you're using your time, how much time you are dedicating toward, creative projects versus, binge watching Netflix, things like that. And, it's making those choices about, how you're going to sort of model your day on a daily basis to kind of create a routine during this thing to keep you going, because, I've seen a lot of, a lot of things in the news and online about, this is dragging on a little bit long now. And a lot of people are getting really antsy and wanting to get out and just kind of ignore, caution. And one of the things that's going to keep all of us safe is, being consistent with that routine every day. And, allotting time, for us to, do practical things, but also time to kind of, feed that creative side of us and make things, while we're here. So I would encourage you all to kind of take a look at that. And when we come back and we do the share, if somebody really wants to talk about that, that's, open for discussion. Okay, that's what that time is for. All right. And like I said, if you haven't sent me anything that you're working on or anything that you want to share, then go ahead and send me something. Okay, to that Fulton County email address. Does everybody have that? I think everybody on the list does at this point. Hi, Christina. How you doing? Let's unmute.
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Good.
I sent you something this morning.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
I sent you a question.
Right.
So.
Okay. Remind me. I remember. Yeah, you sent me a question. What was the question?
I'm going to do another canvas to put next to the canvas that I sent.
Right. So you made a diptych out of it.
And yes, and I'm trying to figure out a focal point. Do you have two focal points? Do you have one? I don't. I'm trying to figure that out. Where to put the focal point on the second?
Well, your focal point right now is up toward the top of the painting and
right.
toward the back, right? So
correct.
my suggestion is on the one to the left of it is maybe pull a flower lower to the forward, make it larger in scale. Again,
right.
Helping to give you that sense of depth in the painting.
Okay.
And
okay.
what would happen between the two of them is it sets up sort of a diagonal, from the one to the left upward to the one, on the right side canvas.
Okay.
And then maybe find a third point in there, a bright spot, some intensity, maybe toward, again, the foreground of the painting that will be on the right, to kind of create this sort of triangular movement.
Okay.
So your eye sort of moves around rather than just back and forth. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to put my email address on here. Somebody's asking for it.